There's a kind of person who doesn't dread being alone. They crave it. They close the door, and something in their chest finally exhales. No performance, no audience, just quiet. And most people don't understand this. They assume something's wrong. They assume loneliness. But what if solitude isn't the wound? What if it's the shelter someone built a long time ago, brick by brick, because the alternative was unbearable? To understand this, you have to go back. Not to a single event, but to a pattern. A house where connection wasn't safe. Maybe love came with conditions. Maybe attention arrived only when you were useful, agreeable, quiet enough not to disturb someone else's mood. Maybe the room got tense before anyone raised their voice, and you learned to read that tension before you learned to read words. And in that house, a child made a decision they didn't know they were making. If I need people less, I can be hurt less. That's not a personality trait forming. That's a nervous system adapting to survive. Psychologists call part of this attachment avoidance. It develops when a child's bids for closeness are met with inconsistency, dismissal, or danger, often enough that the brain rewires its own definition of safety. Instead of learning connection equals comfort, the child learns connection equals risk. And once that wiring sets in, solitude stops being empty. It becomes the only room in the house where nothing could hurt them. Think about what that actually requires of a child. To stop reaching, to stop asking for it doesn't hurt anymore. Because it does hurt. It hurts every single time. But repetition teaches the body to expect the hurt before it even arrives. And eventually the child stops giving anyone the chance to deliver it. They retreat inward, not because they don't feel deeply, but because feeling deeply around other people became too expensive. So they built a self that didn't need anyone. Independent, self-sufficient, low maintenance. The friend who never asked for help. The kid who played quietly in their room for hours and made it look like contentment. And the world rewarded that. Adults called them easy, mature, no trouble at all. No one asked what silence like that actually costs a child to produce. As they grow older, the pattern doesn't fade, it sharpens. They become the adult who feels genuinely peaceful in an empty apartment and mildly exhausted after 20 minutes of small talk. They become the one who cancels plans and feels relief instead of guilt. They become fluent in solitude the way other people are fluent in connection. And somewhere along the way, they start to believe this is simply who they are. Introverted, independent, built different. And maybe some of that is true. But underneath it, if you listen closely, there's often something else. A quiet vigilance. A part of them still scanning rooms the way they scanned that house. Still asking, even now, is it safer in here or out there? And the answer, almost every time, is in here. Alone. Where nothing can disappoint you, because nothing was ever asked of you to begin with. This is where it gets complicated, because solitude isn't inherently a wound. Some people are alone and whole, but for many of these people, alone isn't peace, it's armor. And armor, no matter how well fitted, is still built around an old injury. You can tell the difference by asking one question. Do I choose this because I feel full, or because people once made me feel empty? Those are two very different rooms that look identical from the outside. Here's what it can look like in adulthood. You feel most like yourself when no one is watching. You get quietly resentful when someone needs something from you, even if you never say it out loud. You've perfected the art of disappearing from group chats, slow fading friendships, letting relationships thin out without ever addressing why. You tell yourself you're just busy, just tired, just not a people person. But some nights, alone in the exact solitude you built for yourself, something aches. Not loneliness exactly. Something older than that. Something that remembers wanting to be reached for and not being reached for enough. Carl Jung wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." That's the part people miss. These aren't people incapable of connection. They're people who learned, early and thoroughly, that communicating what mattered to them wasn't safe. So they stopped. Not because they lost the ability to bond, but because they lost the belief that bonding would hold. And here's the quiet tragedy underneath it. Somewhere inside every person who prefers the company of no one, there's a version of them still waiting by a door that never opened. Still listening for footsteps that never came fast enough. That child didn't choose solitude because it felt good. They chose it because the alternative, hoping and being let down again, hurt more than the emptiness ever could. Emptiness, at least, was predictable. Emptiness didn't lie to you first, so they made peace with the predictable. And in a strange way, that peace became real. Not fake, not entirely a mask, but a genuine adaptation that over years calcified into identity. This is why so many people in this pattern will insist, sometimes defensively, that they're simply fine alone. And they might be. But fine and healed aren't always the same address. The real marker isn't whether you enjoy solitude, it's whether you can tolerate closeness without your body treating it like a threat. It's whether you can let someone see you struggling without immediately performing that you've got it handled. It's whether stillness with another person feels safe, or whether it only feels safe once they've left the room. Healing this doesn't mean forcing yourself into constant company you don't want. It doesn't mean solitude is the enemy. It means getting curious about the difference between rest and retreat. Rest replenishes you. Retreat protects you. Rest says, I have enough inside me right now. Retreat says, I don't trust what might happen if I let you in. Both can look identical from the outside, sitting quietly, phone off, door shut, but only one of them is actually free. If this is you, here's what no one ever tells that child who learned to need no one. You were right to protect yourself. You had no other tools. A child with no safety and no power will always choose the room where nothing can touch them. And that instinct, back then, was intelligence, not damage. But you're not in that house anymore. The door isn't locked from the outside. The silence you built to survive doesn't have to be the ceiling you live under forever. You're allowed to want people and still like being alone. You're allowed to enjoy your own company without it meaning you're incapable of anyone else's. The goal was never to force connection you don't want. The goal is to notice when solitude stopped being a preference and quietly became a defense, and to ask that part of you, gently, what would it take for you to believe someone could stay? Because the child who learned to need no one didn't do it out of coldness. They did it out of love, redirected inward, because outward wasn't safe enough to hold it. And that love is still there. It's just been guarding an empty room for a very long time, waiting for someone, maybe even you, to finally knock and mean it.